Right, well, good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining another CraftCon Live webinar with the Three Counties Cider and Perry Association. My name is Gabe Cook, I'm the ciderologist. I am the host of this session, and it gives me great pleasure to be inviting members of the National Association of Cider Makers, or the team behind the National Association of Cider Makers, who are joining us this afternoon. And just in the nick of time, Mr. Bob Price has arrived too. Hi there, Bob.
Hi.
And Policy Advisor Bob Price. We also have Homology and Technical Committee Chair Loraine Boddington, and we have the Director of Public Affairs, Mr. Mark Hopper. So thank you all very much for taking the time to join us today. I know you're all exceedingly busy people. Hopefully everybody is able to see this on Facebook. I'll be checking my phone in a moment to see whether there's any comments that are coming in. And if there are any questions, please do put it into the comments there on Facebook, and I will be relaying them to our guests. We've invited the NACM team to come and join us today as, well, firstly, the important role that they have in UK cider industry, but also because they're very kindly sponsoring the CraftCon Live series of webinars, to which we give you much thanks. And the purpose of today's webinar is to, first of all, understand a little bit about the roles and the functions that you each play within the NACM, and to understand what issues and activities are particularly pertinent at the moment that are going to be impacting, that do or will be impacting upon cider makers and upon cider industry. So we've got an hour or so. I'm sure the time will fly. It normally does. Loraine, if it's okay, I'd like to start with yourself first of all, as the newest member of the NACM team. Could you tell us a little bit about, I suppose, your background and the nature of what your role is?
Thank you, Gabe. So I've been in the cider industry for 32 years-ish. I started life, well, before that I started life at Sainsbury's as a technical information scientist dealing with all sorts of products. Then joined Bulmers and specialised in technical and legislative information, and worked closely with the NACM technical team and Professor Basil Jarvis in collating, I suppose, the additives regulations and some of the work that was done at the EU level, and so writing justifications and technical support for what the cider industry needed at that time. And going on from there, I worked a little bit in quality and self-employed, doing some consultancy work with different cider makers, particularly on the quality side. And then I joined Weston's and have had a number of roles in either technical or technical and project management, right through to installing presses and tanks and all sorts of things. So I've now joined the NACM. I'm on a rather steep learning curve on the pomology side of things, because I'm not a particular grower. I've got 5 pear trees myself, but that's not really
well, that counts as an orchard. So you are an orchardist, Loraine.
Yes, not very successful. But yeah, so I'm the newest member on the pomology side. The technical side, I hope I'll have quite a good understanding from and can support Bob as much as possible. And that's where we are now.
Super. Now, what I think there are few people who are watching this would know that, first of all, that there is a Homology Committee, and that you do actually quite a lot of work. There's quite a lot of research that is being sort of funded or coordinated by the NACM with other organizations, and you're helping PhD students undertake particular bits of research, aren't you? What could you give us a bit of an insight as to what that type of work is?
Yes, so we do some funding, not the major funding, but some support funding, and particularly on things like industrial placements for students studying horticulture So currently we have 8 students, and they are studying things from genetics, which I have to say goes a little bit over my head, but they're looking at things like the genetics behind apple scab and resistance, and so that hopefully in the future trees can be bred that will be resistant to apple scab.
Wow.
It's all very high level research, so it may not come to fruition. It's very much the forefront of research before it gets into the practical terms. So yeah, so we've got one doing apple, as I say, apple scab, Phytophthora, which I believe is something that's very important to everybody and it has seen a bigger growth this year. Again, that's looking at the resistance, how it works, what can be done to prevent it, particularly as more and more chemicals get banned from being used, so we have to look at new systems. We have apple aphid and the parasitoids, so the wasps that eat apple aphids, and whether climate change is going to affect the numbers of aphids and also the timing between the aphids and the wasps, so you're getting a balance. So one never knows, perhaps you can see a rise in aphids or know from the temperatures that you need to get more wasps. That's very hypothetical, but that's what they're looking at and looking at modelling that sort of thing. We also have the susceptibility and interactions between between woolly aphid, which is an import, I believe, from the USA. And causes quite a lot of damage in apple trees. And again, the girl studying that, she's just started this year. She's having problems actually getting her woolly aphids to transfer from one tree onto her experimental ones. So I think she's also looking at trying to get hold of woolly aphids from different parts of the world so she can compare how they work and their genes and things. So it sounds very interesting to me, but it is quite...
This is important stuff. These are obviously particular pests that can and do cause some considerable challenges and issues for all sorts of apple growers, I suppose, not just cider apple growers. Yeah. And scab is one of the key issues for a lot of cider apple growers, especially where you've got bush orchards, because the nature of the slightly sort of more close canopy. So something like, even if it is the opening gambit into undertaking research, it's just brilliant to know that research is being undertaken, that there is an understanding that there are certain things that do cause issues, and if there are ways to get around that, then that's got to be good stuff.
And there are things like apple replant disease, which has been known about for a very long time. I've seen articles in the Long Ashton research reports back in the 1930s talking about apple replant disease, and just looking at, if you can't use chemicals to sanitize the ground that you're going to use, then what else can be used are the biological methods of doing it. So yeah, it's dormancy and bud break. If we have warmer winters, are we going to have problems because we won't have that chill factor that puts the apple trees into full dormancy, and so the issues that are there.
So that's actually something that I was going to ask, is, that's obviously something that a lot of people, even non-technical people, would be able to see and observe, and that winters do appear to be in the main, on average, milder, and so issues around winter dormancy. So is there actually some active research looking into that, or is it just the gathering of the data?
No, the work on that started in 2017, so it's moved on quite a bit. I'm getting all the students to provide me with something written in what I call lay terms, so not quite too scientific, and hopefully then we can put that onto the web pages, and then people can actually go back and talk to the students if it's something that's of real interest to them.
Yeah, super. We have a question, which is, how are these results disseminated for people who have smaller orchards or even larger orchards? How do orchardists be able to get their hands on this info?
Well, this is where I feel the web page has an important function to play. But also, if they just speak to me, I can put them in touch and we can see the best way of doing it. I'm not sure how it's been done in the past, particularly because it's not an area I've concentrated on. So perhaps
I don't think that the results have been sort of published or made easily accessible. Not for any reason of not wanting anybody to see them, just because it's work that's been sort of undertaken without necessarily thinking that there would be a considerable interest out there. But but there are lots of people who are working in their orchards and especially trying to be more sustainable in their orcharding approach. And so any information that can be at their disposal would be of great interest.
I know all the previous research, which was mainly, a lot of it was done by Liz Copas, and that is all within the Cider Museum, and there are indexes that provide information on what's available at the Cider Museum and access there.
Yeah, fantastic. And is there, alluding to the winter dormancy and around sort of climate change issue, is there being any work or research done about sort of future-proofing for varieties, maybe looking at Asturias or somewhere like that, which obviously has a slightly milder climate than historically the UK, but those apple varieties that seem to be able to cope with lower winter dormancy, or that can seem that have average higher summer temperatures. Could it be that we start to get Asturian apple varieties being planted in Somerset?
Possibly.
Yeah.
There is lots of work going on. There's lots of work going on at Brogdale, where they have polytunnels that are at +2 and +4, and looking at different humidities and different CO2 levels. We haven't got any trees in there at the moment, but we're in conversation about that and seeing what work is being done to look at the varieties and the rootstocks that might be less susceptible.
Super. It's absolutely fascinating that there is all of this work being sort of going on behind the scenes. And so, yes, if there was the opportunity on the web page for some of this to be put forward, I'm sure that it would be gobbled up by lots of people. That'd be great.
And we are trying to invite the students to come along to things like the growers' walks, which currently we can't have, yes, and growers' conferences and things like that, so that they can present their information. I believe in the past, Alistair Campbell, that did some work at Lancaster University on pollinators, he did a presentation at one of the growers' walks. So that's another way of disseminating the information that's been gained.
And in terms of the NACM Growers Walk, obviously it would be hopefully for 2021. If there was the opportunity for somebody that has let's say a bittersweet orchard, tannic apples, but weren't necessarily a grower for a larger cider maker, would they be invited or to be able to come along to a growers walk?
I don't know what the rules are. I believe it's been open to all growers.
Oh, super, great. Well, all that would need to be done is for an organisation like the three counties to disseminate the invitation, possibly. Anyway, we've got a year or so to probably sort that out. So.
Yes, the NACM doesn't have a list of growers because it's a cider making association. So we rely very much on our cider makers disseminating that information to their growers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Super. Brilliant. Thank you, Loraine. Well, onto the technical side of things. There is a technical committee. What is the role and function of the technical committee? What are the kind of things that tend to be items on the agenda?
Hand over to Bob now.
Okay.
So you want me to take over, Gabe?
Oh, just to tell me a little bit about what is the work and the action of the technical committee? Yeah.
We've got a meeting coming up on the 3rd of September. It'll be undertaken using Teams, and we'll be looking at the comments we've received to our code of practice from our primary authority. And our primary authority happens to be the local authorities of Devon, Somerset and Torbay, working in a way which acts as the old home authority. And by having a relationship with them, we hope to be able to provide assured advice to members. So it's like having a partner that if we believe something is the best way of doing something, instead of just putting that out ourselves as best practice, we would seek to work with our primary authority to actually have it promoted as assured best practice. So we'll be having that discussion, and it's around descriptors and processing methods for cider. I can't remember, I think it'd be the 13th edition of our code of practice, which has gone back way. So it's not coming to people as a surprise out of the blue. Another issue which we're going to have to talk about is the obesity strategy, which the government has issued. And the reason why it's of interest to us is because the government wished to have calorie information on alcoholic beverages. Alcohol doesn't have to declare its ingredients apart from allergens and intent sweeteners, and it doesn't have to give any nutrition information, unless of course it's less than 1.2, then you have to provide the lot, 1.2 ABV, or as we heard from Mr. Guest, alcohol by volume.
Indeed.
So we're going to have to deal with the issue that there's going to be a requirement for calorie information about cider to be made available to the public. Now, consultation on the means of doing so will be launched probably towards the end of the new year, the end of this year, I mean. But I'm working with the Portman Group, the Brewers, Wine and Spirit Association, to look at perhaps the best way of doing it. Does it have to be on the bottle? Can it be online? I do know, though, that the brewers are keen to have everything on pack. And since the majority of product by volume is from the major producers who happen to be associated with brewers, you may well find that a large number of cider products will actually contain that information on pack.
So obviously there is a process to run through, and indeed I believe Heineken already do publish the calorific and ingredients list on their website, or on the brand's website. So that information is available to the public via webpage. I'm sure for them, and probably for lots of cider makers, that would be their preferred option. There might be some whereby they prefer to list their ingredients on pack, but I suspect that if they do choose, or the ingredients listing would have to be done in the method as per that which was described to us by Richard Alsop from Trading Standards from Herefordshire Council. We had a nice webinar with him, oh gosh, a good couple of months now probably, in a very, very specific way. I suppose there is a challenge for some smaller cider makers whereby rather than making a consistent product, or one with a known specification, they would be making something that is different and unique every single year, and the time and the cost and the expense of having a different having that different information for every single product that they create in every given year, it could be quite a challenging and time-consuming experience, I suppose.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there is, under current food law, the opportunity of using typical values. So you'd have to analyse a product all the time to actually give the exact detail on pack. So as long as we get that written into something for alcoholic beverages, typical values can just be what you would expect from a certain quantity of sugar in a particular product. But to a certain extent, there's absolutely no excuse that I can see as to why information that informs the public of what's contained in an alcoholic beverage isn't more freely available. And if you go online, you will find certain retailers will actually provide you with an ingredient list and nutrition labeling for their own label products.
Yes, I know that Marks and Spencers do that already, certainly, and I think I've done so for quite a long time as it happens. So this is a consultation which is likely to start at the end of the year. Results will come out next year sometime. NACM will keep the 3 counties and all cider makers up to speed with what comes out of that, I'm sure. Interesting, just jumping back one step onto the your comments around the primary authority. So is the opportunity here then with the assured advice this will be around sort of labeling and weights and measures and descriptors, that this will be something that any cider maker in the country can refer to as the authority, and if their authority advises them to do something different, then the cider maker has the chance to say, well, actually, look at this.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of it.
Fantastic.
We had hoped to be further down the road with them, but COVID has gotten in the way, because we wanted to have a training session with Devon and Somerset at Tiverton for them, so they could see cider making firsthand. They do know about cider making because the South Hams operation around Plymouth does have close working relationships with a number of small cider makers there. But what they do hope, and Sweek have agreed to this, is that there will be training sessions which the primary authority be with. So it'll be an iterative issue of they'll be wanting to learn from the Sweeker members, and Sweeker will want to know best practice from Devon.
Sure. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, this is great to hear. I think this is something that is going to be especially helpful to all smaller cider makers, but especially those who are making our small cider making operations that sit outside of classic regions. Although this is the 3 Counties Cider and Perry Association, it has members from all across the UK, including in the West Midlands, in the East Midlands, over into Cambridgeshire, up into Yorkshire, etc. And I think especially in those areas whereby there has been no sort of cider making experience previously, sometimes the inclination and approach to cider making is a little more than belt and braces, and treat it as an absolute food product. And certainly, I know from direct source that some people have even, it seems like, officers have Googled cider and have come up with American websites and have seen it as, you know, fresh pressed apple juice, and have said, well, you've got to be exceedingly stringent in everything that you do here. So to have something that any cider maker can fall upon to say, this is what we need to do, is going to be of massive help. So that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, we have an undertaking with the Environmental Health Department, which is actually based in Hams, South Hams, to address over-stringent hygiene rules from those HEOs that have no idea what cider making is, such that if, I'm trying to think of one in particular, it was a Yorkshire one, a Yorkshire HEO was requiring very stringent practices from a particular company, that we can actually have a body to which we can refer that particular HEO to, so they can understand that best practice for cider making is, you know, this, not having totally aseptic everything around wherever you go because of the fermentation process. So that's supposed to be a benefit on hygiene practices.
Yeah, fantastic.
Where is it? The hygiene, food safety and hygiene regulations is coming up for review. And I've asked the technical committee to look at it to see if there's anything in it that we might need improvement or want to see changes. But I haven't had anything back yet, because I was just wondering if there's anything in it which actually is creating this over-vigilance by HEOs with regard to their work.
Super. Excellent. Bob, thank you so much. We're going to come back to you in a moment when we talk Brexit. But Mark, I'm going to come to you next. You've been working with the NACM for not a huge amount of time, but you have certainly been out and about to lots of events, and I know that you've introduced yourself to lots of cider makers. For anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to have a yak to yet, tell us a little bit about your background and what it is that you're doing with the NACM.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gabe. Yeah, I guess from a background perspective, I've only ever worked in drinks, so which is just over 20 years. But it's been quite varied. So working for very large multinational companies and also very small independent businesses. So sort of seeing the spectrum of what it's like to work in a big company and what happens and what it's like to work in a very small company. But also different roles. So roles in terms of being a retailer, being a brand owner, working in NPD, creating new brands, etc., and taking them to market. So it's been quite varied. And I also was one of those brands that I worked on was a cider brand. And I sat on the NACM as a brand owner, so sitting on that side of the table, if you like. But now, as you say, working on the really the engagement side, stakeholder engagement side of public affairs for the NACM, which I've been doing for maybe 18 months, I think, maybe coming up to 2 years.
Fantastic.
So principally, in terms of what that's been about, is about engaging with main audience, really, in terms of MPs and ministers, and doing that in conjunction with cider makers. So some of which have been some members, some of which have been lots of Three County members and speaker members, etc. So a whole range.
Fantastic. And you have the unenviable role of having to speak to lots of MPs to inform them of the issues pertaining to cider and cider category, and ensuring they're aware of outside of these very, very challenging times, the issues associated with cider anyway. But now more so than ever, because of COVID-19 and the impacts that have been on the category, obviously there's an impact, very strong impact on the hospitality side of things, but then that's the same for everybody. Where cider has got a unique difference, let's say, to beer, is the fact that the majority of the UK cider industry, or certainly the volume of cider that's made, is vertically integrated. Cider makers either grow their own apples or have apples directly grown for them. Because not as much cider has been sold this year, tanks are fuller, not as much room for apples to be utilised. So we're in a bit of there's a bit of a challenging time for the apple growers upcoming, but also for cider makers as well.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a perfect storm, isn't it? In terms of our key selling periods of Easter and summer have been sort of largely taken away from us, and therefore, that challenge that's on the horizon is very real, and one that's certainly going to be challenging for everybody over the next few months. Now,
the government, I forget exactly when you'll tell me, I think it was in the midst, in the maelstrom of everything a little earlier in the year, announced an alcohol consultation. What's the scope of that consultation, and any indications as to what elements might be looked at, or what are the NACM's sort of priorities for advocating to government as to what the industry's after?
It was announced in the budget. Quite often these things appear in the small print in the budget, but in the budget there was an announcement that there would be an alcohol structures review, which was due to start in the spring, which has been pushed back. So there isn't currently a fixed date of when it's going to open, but they are talking about it being autumn. So
so it hasn't even actually opened yet. It's just it was announced last year that it was going to start, and then never got the opportunity to do so. Yeah.
It was announced in the budget earlier in the year. Earlier in the year, it was announced that it was going to commence, and then it's been pushed back basically in terms of the opening of that. Just bear me 1 second.
That's all right. It's the Prime Minister calling. You see, he's very, very interested in cider. COVID can wait for a day.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Right. Was it Boris? Don't worry.
So, yeah, so,
I'm busy.
So
what? Yeah. So what kind of primary issues is the NACM sort of preparing to input on? Do you think? Or what are the primary sort of issues or things that might come through?
I think one of the things is obviously in terms of the scope, as you mentioned, it feels like it's a bit more of a root and branch opportunity for across all alcohol. So this is not just a cider review, this is going to include all categories across the alcohol. So it is quite a large undertaking, I would say, and but you know, and with that brings risk and opportunity. But from a cider perspective, the things that we will primarily be talking about are things related to a review of implementation of a progressive cider duty for smaller cider makers. We'll be looking at a review of flavoured ciders and looking just to try and gain some benefit within the cider bracket.
Sure.
So those are the sort of three sort of primary elements that will be. There will be other things that will come up, which we can touch on, but those will be our primary drivers.
Just pertaining to the championing and the position of a progressive cider duty. For anybody who's watching who's uncertain as to what that terminology means, it would mean a gentle upscaling of duty by volume. So you pay less of a duty rate as a smaller producer, scaling up to a particular volume set. I'm sure there'll be some members. You know, the majority of the members of the Three Counties Cider and Perry Association sits below the unique 70 hectolitre mark, which, you know, since its inception, as we know through various conversations that have been presented to all the regional associations, was technically illegal from its absolute outset and sort of slid under the radar for many years, and then it poked its head above, and then because of Brexit, suddenly less of an issue. I suppose there would be viewers who would just be keen to understand that the protection of 70 hectolitre is still something that is quite prominent on the NACM's mind.
Yeah, no, I think so, absolutely. You know, that will be something that we will continue to want to protect.
Fantastic.
But as I say, everything is up for review. So, you know, everything will be considered in the round, but it will be something that we will want to continue to argue for sure.
Super. And yeah, is there any other sort of particular issue or anything else on the horizon that you think might impact upon cider makers, or the cider makers it might be good for them to know?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there'll just be, as part of that review, I mean, I think the way, and Bob, you might want to chip in with this, but I think the way that it will work is that there will be a call for evidence period, which is the first sort of phase of it. And I think what I would be asking for is, once we know that the review is open, I'd be saying to Three County members and, you know, the wider cider community to make sure we contribute to it and make sure that everybody does actually contribute towards providing evidence for this review, because it is an all-encompassing review, and lots of other, you know, sectors, categories will be inputting to it. And therefore, I would say to everybody, please be, you know, when it opens, you know, let's make sure that everybody contributes to it. So there'll be a period of time, I feel, where it will open and there will be this call for evidence. There will then be a period of reflection within government to come up with a set of policy ideas as to, you know, taking everything in the round, what that then looks like, which will be then published. And then there will be the opportunity to, you know, for us to reflect on that and to try and influence change again before it's actually sort of implemented into.
What do we think is the purpose and nature of the review? Is it around revenue? Is it around incorporating, you know, other strategies and considerations like obesity and public health? Do we have any idea of what the purpose or the overarching point of it is?
I'll come in because it's straightforward.
Because it's what, sorry?
It's straightforward. Right. Some people think that the taxation of alcohol is unfair, and the principal proponents of that are the spirits industry. They feel they're paying far more taxation than beer and wine. And they think the way the bans work discriminates against them. So it was a trip up to Scotland. I think it was a Diageo distillery where he was, Boris Johnson was buttonholed by pointing out that this is Scotland's industry. It's being treated unfairly. Hint, hint, you want Scottish votes, blah, blah, blah. So up pops this suggestion in the Scottish part of the Tory manifesto saying, oh, we'll review structures. And it's solely because the spirits industry, and they've been going on this for year after year, want a linear taxation so that it'll be a unit of tax per ABV for every alcoholic drinks product. And it's not just a UK initiative, they're doing it around the world. They're doing this within the European Union as well. So it's a well orchestrated campaign on their part to get the whole duty structure changed, hopefully that they benefit from it. But, you know, I don't see that they can, because they lost the argument in Europe just recently when the Structures Directive did not include the option for linear taxation.
Well, that neatly segues into the next section to talk with you, Bob, about who'd have thought that this, like by the tail end of last year, that there would be something more engrossing and more compelling than Brexit. But hey, we managed to find one. Fantastic. So it's almost as if Brexit is a secondary thought, but it is obviously happening. If I'm right, you tell me that we leave on at the last day of this year. How are those deals? How are those deals working out? Have we? What happens if there is no deal? What impact is there going to be for cider makers?
I tell you this: there is at this very moment no deal. There will be further discussions in September to try and get a deal. And the deal is a limited deal. That's all they're after, which is, it's called 0 for 0. So only 0 for 0. No other mutual recognition or agreed standards. So basically, we reduce our tariffs on goods to 0 if the EU reduce their tariffs on goods to 0. But that doesn't remove customs requirements. So we know there will be customs requirements going to sell into the EU countries, even if there is a deal. The customs requirements will be more onerous if we don't get a deal with the EU. And there will be tariff barriers to be faced in trying to sell cider into European Union states. European Union countries will obviously have to face UK tariffs if they want to sell their goods here. Fruit juices entering into the UK, if there's no deal, will face an import duty of 30%. And that's for all fruit juices. So kiwi fruit, pineapple, the whole range of fruits that aren't grown in the UK will be subject to that steep tariff.
Just say that, you say a 30% import.
Yeah.
Wow.
Massive. Yeah.
Just out of interest, does that pertain to just the juice or potentially apples themselves?
Oh, there are tariffs on apples. The tariffs on apples will be determined by the season, the time of year that you want to bring them in. So it's like a seasonal tariff to protect the UK season. So off season. There is one bright thing in all this, is that we have a relationship with Chile, one of the earliest trade relations we managed to get, whereby we will import from Chile anything 0 duty. Unfortunately, Chile makes apple juice, so that can come in duty free. Mainly their summers there is our winter. It's kind of off season, so there's no threat to anybody doing that. But the question is, what do you do? Is we don't know yet until the officials in UK and Brussels agree or not agree a deal. And that makes life hard if there's no deal in trading with Northern Ireland. I don't know if anyone on the call has business in Northern Ireland, but basically we have our major markets who operate in Northern Ireland. So they may well take British cider products and produce and sell it over there as part of a deal. But Northern Ireland becomes part of the EU customs union, and some of the major retailers might find it a bit too inconvenient, a bit too hard to take British products into their shops in Northern Ireland because of the paperwork that's got to be undertaken. It's not a seamless trade deal involving Northern Ireland. There is paperwork, there is customs documents to be filled in, and it's going to be a nightmare. So some of the supermarkets say, well, we won't take stuff from the mainland. And in other words, you'll see that Irish cider may replace British cider in Northern Ireland shops because they just don't have to bother with any of the tariffs or any of the paperwork that's going to be required out of that.
That makes sense. And in terms of, you know, there are some cider makers, including those members of the three counties, who export to Russia and to the USA and to some non-EU countries. That's potentially going to be at a full whack rate.
Those that currently do that have an advantage over those who don't, because to sell to Russia, to sell the United States and other non-EU countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they already have in place the customs forms or the EORI numbers or the trading certificates that are required. So if you've got that in house for dealing with the United States, then it would be fairly straightforward to deal with those countries in the EU if we don't have a deal, because they've got the systems in place. The only thing that will be an issue is if we are a 0 for 0 with the EU, there is no single EU piece of legislation you've got to deal with. You have to deal with 27 pieces of legislation affecting cider. And so it's no point saying, well, my cider is acceptable in France. It might not be acceptable in another member state because mutual recognition will not exist.
Gotcha. Now,
so there'll be minimum juice requirements in Greece, which are different to the minimum juice requirements in Latvia, which are different to the minimum juice requirements in Spain. It's going to be totally different, and you have to know your market.
Bringing things back domestically, and let's say, so you mentioned about the Alcohol Structures Directive. For anybody on this call who isn't kind of aware of what that is, in your most succinct way, what it is, or is it what it was? I'm not quite sure. Has it come to a stop, and how might it impact on the UK still? Just a little summary on that.
Okay, it has no impact on the UK because the UK left the European Union.
Okay.
The provisions of the Alcohol Structures Directive do not come into effect in the EU until 2022. And basically, it leaves the existing alcohol structures the same as it always has done, but it facilitates reduced duty rates for small producers for all alcoholic beverages.
Right.
So fruit wines and cider in the European Union can benefit from reduced rates, which is no more than 50% of the existing rate. But that applies to spirits, that applies to wine even, and to beer. It already existed, but the low alcohol beers can now start at 3.5 ABV.
Right.
Now, the impact of the Structures Directive kind of quasi in the UK will be that the Irish government have lost an excuse not to give a reduced rate of cider for small Irish cider makers, because they said it was always illegal under the Structures Directive. That excuse has gone. So Daniel Emerson and the other small Irish cider makers now have the opportunity of saying, hey guys, the rules are changed in 2022. You can give us reduced rates for cider. That will be even more advantageous to Irish cider makers for Northern Ireland.
I see. Well, that's it's good for them. We very much hope that they have the opportunity to do that. How will so are we saying that the Structures Directive has zero impact upon how the UK can legislate on the taxation of cider, and the government is able to do whatever it wants, and is this precisely what the alcohol consultation is leading towards? Is that now that we are also, coming out, or we are out of the EU, that we can do whatever we want, and what does whatever we want look like? And I know that I'm asking you to gaze into your crystal ball here, do you have any anticipation that the government will have an appetite to change things radically as per maybe, equalisation of duty, or some tweaks here and there?
I can't say, because...
No. It was a big ask, I know.
No, because it's all about practicalities. At the end of the day, the government's got a massive borrowing requirement that's got to be filled. And it's not going to be in the mood to give money away. And that's a fundamental. It's just not going to give money away. So whatever it does, it wants to make sure it does not leach revenue from tinkering around with anything, or making any big changes.
How would they view something like progressive cider duty then? Which could, how long a game do they play? Because in an initial instance, they will lose funds because they're losing half a duty rate for these numbers of producers. But the idea, of course, is to facilitate the considerable growth of many of those sub 7,000 litres into taxable territory, with the idea that they will be able to grow, flourish, and actually in 5 or 10 years' time, she'll be able to benefit from the revenue because cider makers have been able to grow. How long into the future do people tend to look?
I think they're working on the basis of the experience they've had with the beer progressive duty scheme, and that will form their opinion going forward. Sure.
Now that's been running since 2002, so they've had 18 years of it. There've been some tweaks and changes along the way. There is it the proposal of some further changes to the progressive beer duty at the moment as a proposed threshold change that is causing some wailing and gnashing of teeth, I see, via social media. So it's obviously a territory that has a lot of issues around it, and potentially some disagreement is the potential best route forward. But hopefully there'll be some simplicity if it is introduced with cider that gives an opportunity there. I was going to ask a question. I've completely forgotten what it was because I was getting so interested in progressive cider duty there. If anybody watching via Facebook, if you've got any questions, please do keep them coming in. They're all quite quiet at the moment, taking in all of this wealth of information. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. What do you obviously right now with so many incredibly challenging things facing the government, and HMRC, I think, have a backlog of things to process of like 19 years by the sounds of it. There are certain, because of the nature of the way that the cider category and the products that are coming in are changing all the time, and that's, a lot of what is under Notice 162 was written in 1976, and obviously cider category and society in general was a little bit different back then to how it was now. The idea of something like if you're utilizing a red fleshed apple and you've fermented that, and marvelously you manage to retain the color and it is pink naturally just from the apple, technically that sits without the color spectrum that is that sits within 162, so it sits in 163 duty. How is there going to be any opportunity to approach and ask for these sort of tweaks and amends that make 162 just a little bit more appropriate for the modern cider world?
On red fleshed fruits, it is not a problem if you stick to the letter of the law. It's the addition of colour that makes it a problem.
Okay.
So if you add a red colour to your cider, it becomes 163. if the fruit is naturally red, it should not be an issue. And we've had this discussion with HMRC almost 12 months ago.
Okay.
And we showed the HMRC officials in Manchester a proper red fruited apple and the cider that is made from it. They have to accept that the wording of Notice 162 refers to added colour.
Okay.
Now, they seem to be concerned at about the wording, in the sense that they're uncomfortable with being able to defend their position because they know they can't defend their position. It's going to be something like, and I know a major cider maker is prepared to do this, but if they try and say that this has to be 163, they will fight it because it's quite categoric. 162 says the addition of colour. Nothing about natural colour of the fruits.
Well, that's good. Another slight anomaly has always been for sparkling cider. The higher rate of duty comes in at 5.5% rather than at 8.5%, which I'm not quite sure the historical reasons as to why that might have been in the first place, and there wouldn't have been many then. But the fact is that now there are, quite a number of people who are producing full method traditionnel 3-bar cork and wire ciders, and the vast majority of cider naturally will come out above 5.5%. They're being massively penalised. Is there any opportunity to have that reviewed in any?
The higher duty on cider in mushroom stopper wired packaging, not just fizzy cider with a 3-bar pressure, all right? It's got to have the mushroom stopper and the wire wraparound, all right?
Yeah.
That was a result of the UK deciding not to contest a complaint by the Italian sparkling wine industry that it was unfair trade discrimination. And the reason why the UK didn't contest it was because they would have lost the battle in the European Court of Justice. So it's a non-contested court case. So it's an out-of-court settlement that we would deal with, that would take on board the fact that it would equalise sparkling ciders and sparkling wines because of that international situation. Now that we're outside the EU, it's a question of whether or not it's an international treaty, an international obligation to observe that.
Okay, so potential opportunity for that to be reviewed in some way. I know, and there are lots of little elements like this. It's just obviously with we've got the combination of such a challenging time for all governments, and cider being, although not an inconsiderable industry, one of the smaller drinks sectors, and there being smaller nuanced parts of it that there are some cider makers would love to have changed, because from a smaller perspective, there is a growth in some of these ciders that eschew some more of the qualities of wines. They're obviously not wines, and again, in keeping with vogue and trend and value perception, it'd be the little something that seems like a line in a piece of text somewhere could have some quite considerable positive impact if it were changed for cider makers. But I suppose that's just one of the ones that we'll have to see over the course of time. There was one question here about, is there a plan of what will replace the protected status, the PGI and PDO products, now that we have left the EU?
Well, the UK ones apply.
The UK products that have PGI marks, once we leave the EU, then do UK products have the ability to use those marks?
In the UK.
Okay.
If there's no deal with the European Union, then there's no wider protection.
So just to clarify, let's say a product that is Herefordshire cider and has the PGI mark to support that. Next year, a Herefordshire cider maker that says Herefordshire cider can still have that and have the PGI logo on their products for sale within the UK, but not within the EU.
If there's no deal.
If there is no deal.
The agreement with Canada has a specific requirement that the Canadians respected the EU PGI's PDOs. And that's going to be part of all international trade agreements that the European Union enters into. It's up to the British government to include those requirements in its trade negotiations.
Very interesting.
Bob, will we be able to still use the logo, or will we have our own logo?
We've got to have our own logo. We can't use the EU logo.
Right.
And
okay. Sorry, that's what I was
furthermore, this brings me back to organics. If there's no deal with the European Union, the organic certification we have for the UK will not be acceptable within the European Union. You have to get your own certification from the member state you're selling it to.
Oh gosh, that's challenging. So the Soil Association, which I assume is the only authority.
Others.
There are others, okay, but the Soil Association, let's say as the prime example, that wouldn't be recognised.
No.
Goodness me, that's obviously a challenge for. There are some cider makers who have some organic products as part of their range. There are some who are entirely organic. So this obviously poses a bit of a challenge and an issue for them, and maybe they can come to you with a little bit of seeking a little bit of advice if this is something that does indeed come to pass. That must be quite challenging.
Well, they'll have to talk to the registering body they were already with to give them the advice on who to go to in the European Union to get registered there.
Super. Marvellous. Well, that sort of concludes all the sort of questions that I had. I don't think we've got any final questions. We'll just hang on for a couple of seconds if there are any final questions. For any of you, Mark, Loraine, or Bob, are there any other particular topics or issues or matters that we haven't had the opportunity to discuss that you think might be pertinent or something useful for Three Counties members to be aware of?
Well, for me, if it's okay, Gabe, just as a sort of an open invitation, really, it's something you touched on earlier in terms of the breadth of geography that the Three Counties members covers. We have a lot of official and MP contact with, MP like the likes of Jesse, Norman, and Bill Wiggin within Herefordshire. But where we've been, I think, quite successful in the last maybe 18 months is stretching our MP network to outside of the core sort of southwest area. And therefore, I guess, something for me would be that if there are Three Counties members which sit outside of the sort of core area that are looking or want to engage with their MP and want some support with that, then more than happy to help organise those, facilitate those.
Super. Well, you heard it, everybody. If there's the opportunity, get involved, help out. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, because when that structures review opens, it is going to be, there is going to be a bit of a rallying cry for all cider makers to make sure we do contribute to it.
Sure, absolutely. Any final sort of thoughts or points, Loraine or Bob?
No.
I think there was one final question around something popped up recently around an issue of that a cider maker, a member of the NACM, has a long time ago, admittedly, trademarked one of their cider brands with the name of an apple variety, which I can understand how that can cause a little bit of issue. It's like a winemaker in the UK trademarking Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. It doesn't really afford the opportunity for anybody else in the industry to do so. Does the NACM have any sort of view on the approach to whether going forward there should be the opportunity for any cider maker to trademark an apple variety name for a product?
I think you're into commercial law here.
Okay, yeah.
The legal situation is the legal situation.
Sure, absolutely. A trademark is a trademark, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it. So thank you all very much, Mark, Bob, and Loraine, for giving up your time this afternoon. As ever, a wealth of information, and I think some insights that not everybody who was watching this afternoon would have necessarily known, that these are things that the NACM gets up to, are aware of. Obviously, under normal times and circumstances, there's normally a representative from the Three Counties Cider and Perry Association, normally the chair, currently Simon Day, who would be present at physical meetings and maybe still currently on sort of Zoom meetings. So, you know, this information gets sort of disseminated and funneled and channeled through him, and there are regular newsletters that go out to the members. So as and when any interesting or important information comes to light, I'm sure that you'll be able to let the members know through those channels. So thank you all very much. Have a pleasant afternoon, evening. I don't know about you, but that autumnal nip is beginning in the air. Those apples will be coming off the trees and going through the strata before you know it. And, you know, not even COVID can stop the cider harvest, can it? So let's hope that everyone has a smooth time. So thank you all very much for your time. Everybody watching at home, just two things to say, actually, just two quick things. Next week, this time next week, or 4 p.m. next Wednesday, the 2nd of September, we are going to be speaking to Rebecca Oladipo from the Portland Group. She's going to be doing a presentation about the code. We are going to revert back to our previous methodology, whereby everybody piles into the Zoom room at Rebecca's request, because she wants it to be a really, really interactive session that is helped by having sort of direct feedback in that way. So you will get a note going out tomorrow probably with all the details. If you want to sign up, send me an email and I'll give you the Zoom link. So as before, all details in that note to come out. So that's next Wednesday, the 2nd of September at 4 p.m. And the second thing, if anybody who watching this isn't aware, a brand new cider campaign has been launched last Thursday. It's called Discover Cider, and it is an industry-wide campaign from biggest to smallest, and its aim and its endeavor is to champion cider, to showcase the positive stories and experiences that consumers can have by drinking our wonderful drink. The website, discovercider.com, it's really bright. There's lots of information in there. There's lots of stories, lots of links, and some fantastic videos that have been put together by Bill Bradshaw, who I'm sure you would all know. And check out the social media channels. They're all at Discover Cider. We just had our first competition. I can tell you that 242 people entered into that competition, which has absolutely blown me away. That's in the course of that competition being open for 5 days only. So there is this interest in cider. It's about getting people aware, excited, and enthused, and getting them to discover cider, obviously. So do go check it out, do go support it, share it and retweet it, and do all of that stuff. So thank you all very much once again. Thanks for your time, Mark, Loraine, and Bob. Everybody else, hopefully see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, Gabe.
A lovely day. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Gabe.